This is the Ransaq meeting on Thursday, December 16th, and I'd like to invite Rabbi Vernon to introduce the program.
Okay, so this program, as Rabbi Yaffe pointed out, this program emanated from our conversations about where we are and where we're going as Jews in America and as Jewish community. And I thought it might be useful to hear from a couple of younger people who have made decisions about their lives to share with us, but I want to do it in a kind of a guided way. I'm only going to say, because they're going to introduce themselves a little bit, that Alicia Post is what is it, Director of Outreach and Programming or something for the American Zionist Movement. She'll correct us. And Eric Post is the Long Island Director of the American Jewish Committee. These are not their first jobs in the Jewish community. We'll find out about that in a little bit. I've talked with them a little bit and about what we're going to do. We're going to explore a little bit where they are now, where they came from in terms of their Jewish development, and we'll go from there. So not because Alicia is the lady of the group, but because Alicia is the older of the two siblings.
There you go.
Alicia, let's start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself now.
Absolutely. So I am the National Program and Communications Director at the American Zionist Movement, which is an umbrella of 39 national Zionist organizations, including Merkaz, the Zionist arm of the conservative movement, among many other like-minded organizations. I've worked for over 20 years, if you can believe that, for the Jewish world, and I am truly a product of the conservative movement. In fact, last week I met Yisahar Hess, the CEO of the conservative movement in Israel, who happens to also be the vice chairman of the World Zionist Organization, and proudly told him that I was born and raised in the conservative movement, and really USY was a huge impact on my Jewish connection and making me who I am. My first job was a brand new organization called Birthright Israel, which I'm sure many of you have now heard of. And I've worked for a number of different organizations. I have proudly been at AZM now for 5 years. And I don't know, is there more that I should share, or I guess that's okay.
A little bit about just so we know, we don't need your age, but your family. What's your family situation right now? I mean, I know it, but
absolutely. So I am single, living in Manhattan. I live in a small studio apartment, and I'm very involved in the young Jewish community, a number of organizations, and just general, involvement in young Jewish community. I work with, I sit on the Young Conference of Presidents, as well as the Council of Young Jewish Presidents. But again, I am single, living in the city. I think I represent probably a lot of young Jewish people here in New York, and also across the country, in terms of where I am in my life.
Thank you very much. Eric.
I don't know how I follow such an eloquent speech by my sister, but my Jewish upbringing is much the same, obviously, because we lived in the same household. We both were in USY.
Conservative shuls. This is one thing in synagogue that I would say I think is important, is I noticed that the prayer books are always in Hebrew and they have English, but I do feel, in terms of acceptance, something really important that I'd love to see, and I know prayer books are expensive, but I think something like making sure that there is transliteration or having a supplement would be really important, to make sure that people that didn't have that upbringing can be in the synagogue and feel that they can follow along and be included. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, but I guess that's not personal to me, as thank God I can read along to a degree and embrace it.
Okay, Eric, what do you want to add about your, because one of the things that we know is that while children grow up under the same roof, they don't necessarily experience the family the same way.
Yeah, so my experience was very similar to Alicia's. We're only 4 years apart. So I would just add on the prayer book part that it's ironic that the art scroll usually has a lot more explanation than the any of the other conservative sidurim. So that's an aside, but it would be great to get more explanatory of when to bend your knee, when to take 3 steps back, etc. But that's totally off the topic, I think. But yeah, I mean, I went on the same trips that Alicia did, Wheels and USY, Poland, Israel pilgrimage, and we grew up the same way. I would say my Hebrew school experience was somewhat torturous, maybe a little bit of a over exaggeration, but it was very much rote and very much here are the prayers, learn how to write in script in Hebrew. And but it was nice. I built some friendships that I still have today. And it was very formative years. I think when it comes down to it, just to encapsulate what Alicia's saying, is that we are Jews that have Judaism in our kishkas, and from day one, Israel was important, combating anti-Semitism was important, Holocaust memory was important, having survivors in our life was important, particularly a great uncle of ours who his whole family was extinguished in the Holocaust, and that was all very important. And we knew who we were, regardless of we went to public school, regardless I went to a Jewish summer camp, but Alicia too, but not very secular, not very Jewish.
We didn't know about Jewish camping. It was camps that had Jews, right?
Right, so. It wasn't Jewish camping for sure. But yeah, I mean, we knew who we were, and USY was only a supplement to that and kind of got that going. But from a very early age, it was, in our household, you knew who you were, and the pride that came along with belonging to a community and belonging to a people. That was always important.
All right, so I want you mentioned a couple of things that were important to USY and your Poland-Israel pilgrimage experiences, which you both had as strong influences on you in your adolescence. So I'm wondering now about your college years. Were you involved in Hillel? Were you involved in Jewish activities? Or for many Jewish college students, it's sort of like college years are a break, a hiatus, nothing much going on. What about your college years?
It's interesting because I went to school saying, oh, I'm going to be really involved in Hillel. I'm definitely going to be active there. And I got there and the Hillel didn't speak to me at the time. The director just, I think something that is super important is personal connection, right? Especially in today's day and age, there's so much noise, there's so much out there, there's so much going on. And even today, if I have a personal connection with the rabbi or creating that community and having people that will reach out to you and say, I'll see you tomorrow at synagogue, or, hey, how's your week going? Or what are your needs, or whatever, having that personal connection. And I just didn't feel a personal connection, and I didn't really embrace the Hillel, and I wasn't really involved with Jewish life a lot on my campus. And in fact, when I went to college, I had a very strong Jewish identity, and I actually strayed from it a bit at my campus. I happened to be close with my friend Eric Liederman, who just joined the AZM board representing Merkaz, who runs Masorti on campus. And we talk a lot about the importance of Masorti on campus and how more rabbis should embrace and utilize it and build it. And maybe that's an avenue that can help strengthen that community. When I did ultimately know that I wanted to make the world a better place, and I couldn't figure out how, and it ended up that realizing that the Jewish community was the place that I can make that difference. And that was a special moment for me that I then reconnected as I was leaving college. But in all transparency, college was not where I had a Jewish identity and Jewish connection. I went, by the way, to Ithaca College, just to note.
Okay, Eric?
So this is where our stories differ a little bit. So I went to George Washington University, and obviously it's a very political campus, being in the heart of Foggy Bottom near the State Department. And I loved my Hillel experience on campus. A lot of friends that were engaged and involved. We did a lot of pro-Israel activity through APAC and other organizations. I went to Friday night services and holiday services. I always loved that holiday services, no offense, Rabbi Vernon, but holiday services were like 2 hours. There was no choir, no sermons, no anything. It was just like bing, bam, boom, you're out. But it was great. And I had a very, very positive experience. Also in DC, like some of my experiences were supplemented with Israel-related activities. So I interned at the Israeli embassy and did some other things that were, I actually interned at the American Jewish Committee on Long Island in 2002. So coming full circle here back in 2021, or when I started AJC in 2016. I had a very positive experience, and it was definitely this, on the trajectory that I'm on now.
If you don't mind, I'll add that there really wasn't a lot on my campus at the time. I know now there's, APAC on campus, there's STEM there's this, there's that, there's so many different groups, and it's really grown. And I think maybe it would be interesting, should there have been those opportunities on my campus that there weren't. But you just reminded me, there was one time I remember I didn't remember to sign up for some holiday. And I went to the rabbi and I said, oh, I'll be joining for, Passover dinner night or something. He said, oh, sorry, we're sold out. And I remember thinking, if I was that Hillel rabbi, I would have done anything to figure out pulling an extra chair and making sure that young Jew had that meal. And I remember at the time being in shock that they were sold out and I didn't sign up in time. And so again, to me, just making sure that there are those opportunities.
One other thing I'll say is that obviously the environment that we went to campus, we lived in campus, is very different than the environment that a lot of students do today. Even on George Washington University's campus, there's been, you might have seen a month ago or so, there was an incident, which I think the jury's still out on whether it was strictly anti-Semitic, or, there were other religious articles from other faiths that were destroyed. And say what you will about it, I think that's not the important part. The important part is that Jewish religious items were desecrated, and you have the whole BDS movement, which didn't exist when I was, or was just starting when I was on college campus. So things were very different. We were able to be very, out there and very prideful, and nobody really said anything. It was also, even during the second Intifada, in 2001, 2002, when I was in college, it still wasn't what you have now. It wasn't, there wasn't the level of organization, there wasn't the level of hostility in many respects to Jewish students on campus.
Right. Good. I think that's helpful, and I think something that the Jewish community is more aware of and more attentive to. And you're right. There's a lot more Jewish student activity on campus than there was 20 years ago. All right. The last thing I'd like to do, or almost the next last thing, is look down the road. 10 years from now. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, where do you think where do you want to be? Where would you like to be? Eric, you mentioned that you have a 3-year-old. Alicia, you and I talked a little bit about this. Where would you like to be in 10 or 15 years? Both in terms of your own family life and in terms of, what you plan to do for kids if you have kids, and, where you see yourselves in Jewish life 10, 15 years down the road. Who wants to go? Who wants to lead that?
I'll go. So I'd like to be the AJC Long Island director, which is a good thing because I've already secured that job, but probably about 3 additional staff members would be nice. And Judaically, family life, engaged in a synagogue in the area, and hopefully not on the board or anything like that, because I know what kind of headaches that involves, and I already have headaches. But engaged Jewishly, and engaged with the JCC, and engaged with the synagogue, and attracting young Jews to the work that I do, which I'm currently working on now, which is always a challenge, solely because of not because of interest, but because of time and money constraints and all that. Attracting young people to our work, usually like 50s and 60s is more of a sweet spot for engagement and the kind of work we're doing. But we have attracted some younger folks, albeit their time and is somewhat limited. But yeah, so being engaged and engaging others.
All right, you mentioned you have a 3-year-old, and you mentioned he goes to the JCC preschool. So
Yeah.
you're going to be involved in the synagogue. So what are you planning on doing to raise your kids? And
Jewish camping.
you might have a sibling.
Yeah, exactly. Jewish camping, which is something that I didn't do. I want to give my child every available opportunity to land where I landed, not from a brainwashing perspective. Obviously, right now he can choose what he wants to do Judaically, and everything like that. But, I want to give him the positive Jewish environments to grow, to learn, to experience, Jewish camping, potentially, youth group, USY or other, Hebrew school, bar mitzvah, the whole rigmarole that we were exposed to, plus Jewish camping, and send him to a school, a college that has a very strong Hillel, and opportunities to engage Judaically, if that's his choice. And I think that's it.
And you have a great partner in that.
Yeah, my wife is a teacher at Schechter School, so she, I think we will send my son to public school, but we, obviously we have good Judaic education at home too. So,
Alicia?
So first of all, it's such an honor that people now come up to me and say, "Are you Eric's sister?" So it's really nice to have such an amazing sibling. We have another sibling who's also incredible, just to note, who has 2 beautiful children as well, and has raised them, in the community. First of all, if and when is if and how. I think maybe one day I would consider adopting or fostering or thinking about a family, meeting somebody with children. I'm not completely closed to the concept, although, I am comfortable in my life. Of course, I've always said that if I have children, they will be raised in the Jewish community. There is no question. Years ago, I met a guy at a bar, and I said he wasn't Jewish. And I said, well, I'm Jewish, and if we have children, they'll be raised Jewish. And my friend said, oh, get to know him first. I said, no. I said, call your mom right now. Ask her if it's okay that your kid is not having a baptism, that you're going to stand proudly when your son's bar mitzvah or whatever, and, it's kind of, those are deal breakers for me that for me, it's super important regardless of where my life ends up, that, and I do consider everyone I work with, family and children, and I'm constantly working. I work with a lot of college students, and just to go back for a second to that, and, for them to choose to be the token on their campus, the representative, and, what that's like, and what they're choosing. And I try and help them navigate that conversation. And to me, those in part are my children. But where I think I'll be, it's a great question. People tell me all the time about opportunities, and I say, oh, you'd be great in sales. And I said, but if I'm not selling Israel, I don't want to do it. Like, to me, my job is my purpose. It's, I say that it's not a job, it's a calling, it's a life mission, and that I really eat, sleep, and breathe Israel and the Jewish people. And I can't imagine what else I would be doing. So I definitely envision continuing to work in the community, in whatever capacity that may be. I'm not sure. I'm open to the potentials and opportunities. I really enjoy AZM because we are a large tent, and I work with people from far right to far left, from all different levels of observancy, and they're all different connections to Israel. And I think it's so important to help whatever that connection is. But, you know, Hebrew language and culture is so important, helping people with Aliyah, helping people with their connection to Israel and their connection to their Judaism. So I'm not exactly sure what the future will hold, but I'm open to the possibilities, but know that it will continue to be a Jewish path.
I want to ask one final question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the colleagues. And then one final question is: we're talking with a group of rabbis, and one of the things that did and didn't come up. You mentioned a disappointing experience with the Hillel rabbi at Ithaca, but I'm wondering: along the way, were there any significant positive experiences with rabbis that may have had some impact or some influence, whether it's in the synagogue you grew up in or anywhere?
You want to go first, Lloyd?
If the answer is no, the answer is no.
all the time. Just last night, I was at Rabbi Joe Potasnik's birthday party, who's become a close friend and colleague, and actually saw a number of your colleagues there, and people, and you know, I think, again, I'll go back to that personal connection. I was involved with Manhattan Jewish Experience because it was really a young community. And again, when the rabbi would text me, even now, I'm involved in Clubhouse, a silly app like Facebook and Instagram, and I've made a number of connections to rabbis that every Friday they send me you know, a Torah thought, and it really makes my week. And I know that if I'm having issues or struggles, whatever it may be, I know that they're there, that I can reach out to them, that I can text or WhatsApp or call, and they'll be there for me. And it really is so important to me. So there are many rabbis in my life that I feel really connected to, that I know are there as friends and spiritual guidance and leaders. And I feel very strongly that they help me all the time. So tons of, thank God, positive experiences.
Eric?
And a number of people that I grew up with in USY became rabbis, some of whom are rabbis on Long Island. Rabbi Dave Siegel, who many of you know, a Hofstra Hillel director. He was one of the two rabbis that married me. We each got the choice of a rabbi, and he was my choice. And he's someone who was a counselor in USY, who I've known for over 20 years, and we do programs together. I just spoke at Hofstra last week or 2 weeks ago on combating anti-Semitism. And, you know, these are lifelong relationships that the positive experiences that I had 20 odd years ago that I continue to have today. Rabbi Jason Fruithandler, someone I've known since USY. I'm sure there are others if I think about it. I also have known, you know, a number of rabbis that are still part of Ransaq and part of the Long Island Board of Rabbis that were rabbis. Maybe they were 20 or 20 plus years younger at the point in time, but they were rabbis at the time who hosted, you know, Kinusim and other activities, who we worked with. And so I think I've been surrounded by, good rabbis my entire, adolescence and growing up.
All right. Is there anything else you think that's worthy in terms of, that's notable in terms of your Jewish development or Jewish experiences that we haven't talked about that you would want to give a closing, just make sure it's on the agenda, it's out there. And if there isn't, that's okay.
I'll just reiterate, community is so important, personal contact, personal connection, that, it's funny because it seems old school, there's so many new, cool ways to connect, but, I really value that person to person connection. And I found it so valuable throughout, everything. When I don't know how people do it, that they have the time that before the holidays or before a special occasion that they reach out. And I think that it's definitely helped to guide me and be there for me. And even if it's not on a daily basis, you know, as Eric said, it's in our kishkas, like it's something I'll never forget that there's been throughout my path, you know, having that guidance and knowing that people are there should I need them. So
I'll just add one note, and I think it kind of goes without saying, I think, with the rabbis and Ransaq because of the people that you are and the way that you educate, but I would say never give up on or never discount the importance of any one singular student, because I was the probably among the lower echelon of students in Hebrew school, and I probably had soccer more on my mind than Hebrew school. And I remember every Rosh Hashanah, when I would come home from school or whatever, I'd joke around with the Hebrew school principal at the time and say, like, you never thought that I would be the one who'd be working in a Jewish organization, right? And so I think Jewish history teaches the importance of individuals, you know, whether it's Esther or, you know, any number, Herzl, I don't know, any number of Jews who, and believe me, I don't compare myself to these individuals, but I'm part of a collective today that is doing, I believe, good work for the Jewish community. And I wasn't the model student growing up. So I think, you know, any of the kids that are in Hebrew school or any of the kids that, you know, you never know when you're going to spark interest, and you never know when you're going to, you know, keep a flame going that will one day blossom into real engagement in the Jewish community.
All right, colleagues, any time for your questions. If you have any questions, David Wise.
Hi, Alicia and Eric. Thanks so much for sharing your personal journeys, and thank you so much for serving the Jewish community in a love of Israel and love of peoplehood. So, in your, I hate to use this term, in your demographic, there are other Jews who are allergic to the legacy institutions that you serve for one of two reasons. One, they're not at all connected to Jewish life. Two, they're really connected to Jewish life, but they have a lot of antipathy toward legacy Jewish institutions. Perhaps they're connected to Jewish organizations that aren't included in the conference. How do you interact with your, what are your experiences of interaction with Jews of your age, perhaps similar backgrounds, who see Jewish peoplehood, Israel, relationships with each other in a different way from both of those camps?
So I would say, whether it's people that are, you know, non-Jewish who are, or Jewish who are, you know, are either, you know, off the rails, I would say, to the left, or off the rails to the right. And we don't, you know, AJC is a very centrist organization, and I know AZM also is a very collaborative, you know, welcoming organization of many different, you know, types of Jews and types of opinions. But I focus on people that, you know, are interested in our work. And, you know, there's plenty, especially if our work is very retail. It's about finding individuals who care about our work and really cultivating them and working with them and introducing them to our nuance and the way we advocate. And so I don't really focus on people that are, you know, that don't have, you know, are aligned with the core kind of issues and values that the, you know, I would call the mainstream of the Jewish community has. But I really focus on people that, you know, are interested or curious, and who don't have, you know, who aren't shutting out or have preconceived notions about, you know, organized Jewish life or specific institutions.
I mean, I think it's a fascinating question, and it's really important, right? That there's so many different types of people with their different connections. I know we meet with new groups all the time that aren't part of the currently 39 and growing organizations. You know, I've been to some really interesting programs and things, and heard about all different types of minions and places that are really different. You know, I try to attend them. I try and hear about them and learn about them. And, you know, I think it's important to meet people where they are. So I think collaboration is important to make sure that you're doing programming where you invite different people and different speakers and welcome, different ideas. It's really challenging because, as Eric said, like you want to focus on that core, they say when you're doing like Israel advocacy, there's, 10% that's definitely on your side, the 80% of the like, don't know, don't care that you need to focus on. And then the 10%, you're never going to change their mind. So there is a degree, as much as you don't want to forget about anyone and you want to not give up on anyone, there may be those people that you can't reach, right? And I hate saying that. But generally, I think that there's a lot of new ways and ideas to be able to embrace people, to hear about what their connection is, and then figure out if there's a way to bridge that and create some kind of program where they find the connection to what you're doing and where that overlaps. It's a really good question. And I think I need to think a little bit more about it. Like I said, we have this large tent, but of course there's people that fall outside of it on all sides. And people that don't embrace the concept. I mean, every day there's new organizations being created, right? We worked with these young kids the other day that we invited to a meeting called the New Zionist Congress. And they have a huge young group of people. So we met with them and we embraced them and we said, we get that you're not part of any of our organizations, that you have your own thing, but can we help guide you, mentor you? Did you know that there was this Zionist project conference last week with these great speakers? They said, no. We said, we'll tell you about it and be in touch with us, and anything we can do, keep in contact with us. We'd love to see how we can communicate with you and help you do what you're doing. And I think that helped them say, you know what, we'll be in touch with this institution. They have some value to us. So
can I ask what it is that they are doing? Who is this new Zionist Congress?
Yeah, I mean,
what's their goal? Who are they?
It's a young group that, and they have Zionist book clubs and they have speakers. And, I think that they felt the current institutional things didn't speak to them, and they created their own organization. But I don't know if I laughed, like maybe they didn't do the market research and understand that there's a real Zionist Congress and there's but I think ultimately they'll probably choose to be part of it and see how they can work within the institutional world. I think that will happen. We shall see.
Can I ask, are they of the ilk that are aligned with J Street and
No.
So if you Google them and you find newzionist.org, you'll see that their board members include Barry Weiss, Blake Flayton, I think is the exec, right? Einat Wolf, Judah Pearl, Liel Leibowitz, Noah Tishby, and others. So it seems to me that they're not a non-player on the Zionist spectrum.
And there's there's a group called Rimon of young kids that are doing educational programs. There's an Israel Summit on college campuses for students, by students. There's new groups popping up constantly. And, one of our goals is to see where they are and embrace them and say, this is who we are. You're welcome to join us. But if you don't want to, at least let's be in touch. Let's follow each other's journeys and let's see when and how it makes sense. Maybe we'll invite them to come speak at one of our conferences. And I don't doubt, even if they're not embracing our community, that opportunity is exciting to them to promote the work they're doing. So, I hope to continue to, try and figure out ways of building those connections.
So I want to try to, because I have a sense of where David might have been going with this. I want to try to slice into it a little bit differently. In your lives, of your closest circles, not the organizations, but of the closest circles, how many, and this is always a question, how many of your friends in your closest circles are like you in terms of their Jewish sensibilities now? Do you have any friends who are, who you have personal relations with, but they're not engaged with anything Jewish at all?
Well, I think we both have a lot of non-Jewish friends. I particularly from high school have a ton of Jewish. I didn't know when I was in high school that I had a lot of friends, but out of high school, which would have been helpful then. But I realized after high school that I had a lot of high school friends. So most of my friends are from high school who are non-Jewish. But it's great. But that part is great because you get to be the messenger and the, show people, and I don't know if it's because of me, but some of my friends now send happy holiday cards, and don't even, or at least they send me one and not a Merry Christmas card. And I appreciate that. And I let them know I appreciate that. So I think also we preach about the importance of Jewish people who are affiliated Jews reaching out to non-Jews, clergy, leaders, their neighbors about anti-Semitism, how it's affecting our communities. So we love when people have, a lot of and I know a lot of people on the call are engaged in interfaith, dialogue and with other clergy and other communities. So most of my friends, I would say a lot of my friends are not Jewish. The friends that are Jewish, most of them are pretty affiliated. I do have some friends a couple friends that are affiliated, but also I would consider them like borderline detractors of Israel and issues. And quite frankly, we don't get into it too much because I think when you know somebody so personally and you know them so well, it's very hard to get into those conversations. You almost have to avoid them because you're not going to change their mind, they're not going to change your mind, and you might as well just continue being friends and kind of not dwell on the fact that you differ on specific actions of the Israeli government or specific whatever it may be that's divisive within the Jewish community.
I would say birds of a feather. So I think a lot of the people in my life, when you're younger, you're friends with people because you go to the same school, camp, whatever. And I think now I've noticed a lot of my friends, because of the choices we've made, we've aggregated, our lives have come together. So I do have a lot of friends in more similar ideology or lifestyle or connection, but for sure, I have friends that are not connected. And I find when certain lifestyle things come up, God forbid you have a loss in your family or you're getting married or whatever, all of a sudden they're looking at that connection and what that means and how they're going to approach it. And I joke oftentimes, I think Eric would probably agree that we become like, the rabbis to our friends of, what do I do? What does it look like? I had my friend did an event the other day and it was during Hanukkah. And she said, I want to make sure that people who are kosher can eat. So can you guide me through this? And she said, I could just put out regular plates, right? And I said, well, depending on their level of kashrut, you can't. And it was amazing to me, the lack of knowledge. And I think that it's so important to continue to educate people on Judaism and what it means. And I think so many people really don't know. Again, I'm on this app Clubhouse, and to hear the lack of knowledge of these active, involved, invested Jews that promote Israel, that have this strong connection, but don't understand Judaism and don't know a lot of the basics about their own religion, to me is shocking. And so I think we're constantly trying to guide people and educate them on that. And I think it's really interesting, regardless of their age, people in their 30s and 40s, I think still really don't have a lot of the basics if they didn't go through a similar educational experience. And I think that there's really a need still to have the basics. I remember I had a study partner for a while and we got a book about Jewish weddings, and I went to my first really observant Jewish wedding and it was amazing. I learned so much, and I said, how didn't I know that growing up, and I think that there's real value in continuing to have Jewish education.
Okay, anything else anybody wants to ask?
Um, you know, Eric, you said that those people who are, sort of Israel detractors and people that are, not interested or, are, sort of, it's hard to talk to them, and maybe you even avoid those conversations. My wife just got off the phone with our niece who lives in Washington, and you all may know Rabbi Weinblatt, who started, the Zionist coalition of rabbis, and he gave a great interview about why do we need rabbis? Isn't every rabbi a Zionist, and the answer is no. And my niece, shared with us that a number of her, she's 38, okay, a number of her with 3 children, a number of her contemporaries are leaving Stuart's shul because he is a strong advocate for Israel, and that's all. As far as Israel's concerned, you only hear the Israel advocacy, and not so much my niece, but her friends find that, it puts them off, and they're seeking a different shul. They're not leaving, their Judaism, but they're seeking a different shul, and I'm getting from my own. Now, you guys spoke about your childhood, which is you're a little bit older than a bunch of people I'm thinking about. I've got, nieces and nephews in their 20s and some things, and they're one's in Harvard Law School and one's a medical student. They're all, really great kids and doing great things. And they went to Schechter, and they came to my Seders every year, and they did all that. But anything that speaks of tribalism, or anything that speaks of unique identity, and one of them even said that they talked about how Israel is a racist country, and I hear this, and I'm feeling more and more, and living in New York, we're a little guarded, I guess, if you will, because there's a lot of more strength here and in Long Island or whatever. But I'm really concerned. I'm concerned about the rift, the difficult on college campuses, and the people, Eric, that you're talking about that are your contemporaries, that aren't enabling their children to have Judaism in their kishkas. You said that when you grew up, and what I heard was it wasn't so much the synagogue or the rabbis or the Hebrew school or anything else. It was your parents and your family and your, what was going on at home. And I always say that it's that I've been a rabbi now for 30 years, and I feel that us who are in the formal Jewish education world, we miss the boat. When people, when we just sort of looked the other way, and people said, well, we don't keep kosher. And we just said, well, that's just the way it is. And there was no discussion. I think it should have been family education. There should have been a month where everybody tried it, and we discussed it, and we talked about it, and what did it feel like? And, and get the parents and the families involved. So I know I said a lot of things, but you gave this wonder, you guys, fabulous. You're doing great work. You're reaching out. You're making a difference. I'm concerned about your contemporaries, and I'm concerned about today's college kids who are going to become these people. And yeah, they're Jewish, but the intermarriage rate is up 70%. And I'm feeling, as a rabbi who's been doing this for 30 years, I'm very, I got a great shul and we're doing great things, and but I think that in many ways we failed, and that's one of the reasons why we had this program today. That you are a success, okay? We didn't fail with you, but I think there's a lot of failure out there. And I'm wondering, as young people, David, you have children, and you have another sibling who has children. They're growing up in this world, and there's one of the rabbis had to leave because of this anti-hate And I went to that anti-hate thing at Times Square. I don't know if you were there, but I won't talk about that now, but it was very disappointing. But anyway, those are my thoughts from today. Thank you. And however you would like to respond, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I mean, I think of, who was it, Seth Rogen recently, who said, that he was lied to his whole life, and taught this false narrative about Israel. And, I think it is really important in today's day and age to make sure to have those. First of all, I work very closely with Rabbi Weinblatt, and
He's a friend
the
of mine,
program.
by the way.
Yes. And in fact, I just was with Noam in Florida, one of the sons. But, I think that it is really important to, especially for today's youth, to say, yes, we support Israel, but yes, it's not perfect, and show that there are challenges. I work with 10 Zionist youth movements, all the classic ones, USY, NCSY, NIFTY, Young Judea, BBYO, but also the Zionist youth movements, Habanim Dror, Hashomer Hatzair, B'nai Akiva, Sofim, Maccabi Yosei. So when talking with a lot of these movements, they are teaching, and they feel it's so important to talk about the elephant in the room, right? The problems of Israel. I mean, it's so important to showcase all the beauty and all the positive things, but you do need to talk about some of the challenges. And if you don't, people are not going to resonate with just, that pro-Israel talk. And it is a different thing than when we grew up. To me personally, I think it's so important that you come to the table and you say, Israel has a right to exist as a sovereign Jewish nation in peace and security. Now we can talk about some of the issues and some of the problems and what that looks like, and what, dive into some of those things. But, it's definitely something that we didn't deal with when we were growing up so much. We were just taught about the love of Israel, and we didn't know. And there's so much more out there now, and social media, and if you aren't prepared to have some of those conversations, you're going to lose. You're right, because people are going to have what to say, and you're not going to have good response. You're just going to say, well, but it's high tech and there's beaches and it's beautiful. No, you can't just have that surface conversation. You really need to have some of those more challenging conversations. It's not easy, but kids understand that, yes, Israel is this amazing place, but I think if you don't do that in the right way, and there's a lot of great resources out there. I'm in this social media fellowship right now with the Conference of Presidents, and Vibe Israel yesterday spoke, and ADL the week before, and ADL was more the stats and the issues, but Vibe Israel on their website has resources and things you can download and conversations you can have. They're more trying to brand Israel in a positive light, but I'm sure that there are many other organizations that I can think of and different things. I mean, I'm sure AJC has some wonderful programs where they have conversations to discuss that Eric could talk about. But I think you're right that by just being positive about Israel, unfortunately, doesn't work anymore.
Okay.
That was very well said, Alicia. I would just add, I think unfortunately, and this is kind of what I was saying before about my raising my son, like I'll put him in Jewish summer camp, we send him to Hebrew school, but there's no way to know, 15 years from now when he goes to college, whether he's going to be part of a far left, anti-Israel Jewish group, or a far right, whatever, group on Israel. But we start, I think we can do the best we can is just show positive Jewish experiences and hope that they get the point and they fall within the big tent of Zionism, and understand the historical importance of combating anti-Semitism, and that they're part of the people that are being targeted by anti-Semitism. And I would also say, we start with juniors and seniors in high school, often a very curious time, learning. Sure, they want to question, and we need to be. AJC is a very nuanced organization in that we don't And I think many of our conversations need to be nuanced. And that's what Alicia was saying. Like, it can't just be all good, but we can't just like some people want to do, focus on just all bad. It's a complex situation. Everything most things in this world are complex situations and can't be explained very simply or easily. I think also one more problem is that the world we live in is not fit for nuance and nice conversations, and the Twitter world and social media and polarization in our country are not fit for nuanced conversation where we can come together slightly on the right, slightly on the left, in the center, and come to an agreement on issues. And unfortunately, these spaces are not conducive to not easy for pro-Israel advocates, not conducive to and also I think unfortunately the cards are stacked against Israel. I was talking yesterday to our realtor about who's Israeli, about, she's like, oh, Israel has bad PR. And I was like, no, well, maybe they could do better, but I said the real problem is the Israel is not David and Goliath anymore. Like 1967, unfortunately the images have changed and people see Israel as the Goliath and the Palestinians as the David. So I think there's a lot of different factors that we're dealing with, but we also focus on people that are curious and want to learn more and don't have these hardened opinions one way or the other that Israel is all bad or Israel is perfect, but we try to find nuance and centrist thought, and that's what we're doing.
Can I have one follow-up, Arthur? Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You mentioned that part of your Judaism and your kishkas was you have an uncle who was a Holocaust survivor, and that was part of your growing up. And in rabbinic circles and Jewish educational circles, it's been said for the last at least 10 years that the Holocaust is no longer becoming relevant to the students, and they really don't relate to it, and we've got to get away from what I grew up with. I'm on the end, but that was huge in my life. The movies we saw in Hebrew school, and you got to be Jewish in honor of those who lost their lives, and that was one thing. But the other thing that I think is really, people say, the Jews should go back where they came from, and they occupied, the Arab areas. And the reality, I mean, what I feel that the I don't know, the unaffiliated or the non-committed or the uneducated or whatever, and there's a lot of those, in the American Jewish community. They identify as Jews, but they don't get it, that there are more Jews living in Israel than anywhere else in the world. Iran is ready to blow us up with nuclear powers. And this is like a real crisis. And there could be another Holocaust. And I don't feel that there is that narrative. I mean, I'm a rabbi I'm very joyous, and I think that we should get away from, they tried to kill us and all that kind of stuff, but I think that the narrative of Israel is the response, that we're no longer going to be the victim. We're going to be in charge of our lives. And we're going to do it in a really good Jewish way and be a light unto the nations, because Israel is amazing in so many ways. Yes, there are problems, and I'm one of those who will recognize that and say, there are certain policies and certain things that need to be better. But so is that true with America and everywhere else in the world, But as Jews, and that's what I'm wondering about from this discussion and from your perspective as young leadership Jews reaching out to the American Jewish community. I understand what you say, Eric, that you try to interact with those people who are interested. That's sort of like, me saying, well, the people that come to shul, that's great. all the people that aren't here, I don't really have to worry about, but the people that are there, I want to nurture their souls. Well, that's true, but I think that if we don't like recognize that there, I don't know, 500 people that come twice a year and I don't see them, I don't think I should write them off. And that's how
I think we're in very different, obviously we work together, but we're also in very different spaces. And, what a rabbi's responsibility is, I think somewhat different than what Alicia or myself's role and responsibility is. So I think to that extent, who we can pay attention to and who we need to pay attention to, who we need to engage, I think to some degree is a different, dynamic.
Okay.
I think
Fair enough.
the Holocaust is important and will always be important, but it can't be the main identity, and it can't be the connection. I think it is really important to not, we've discussed it not being the focus, not only having that, and you can't say Israel only exists because the Holocaust and because if there was another, no, and that can't be the conversation. And we've talked a lot about that in some of my younger circles, like that yes, that was the connection and it is still important, but it's not it.
And it's part of history. It is history.
Yeah, absolutely. But
modern history, not so long ago.
Of course.
I want to thank Eric and Alicia for giving us this time this morning, and my colleagues who joined us. Thank you so much. These are not issues that we're going to resolve in an hour. I hope we all have that all of my colleagues have a little bit better perspective on how it is that some people at least went through the growing up process and the becoming Jewish process to arrive at where Alicia and Eric have arrived. Without at the risk of oversimplifying, I think we heard that they had that their family was connected, and they were introduced to Jewish life through their family, both the contemporary Jewish life in terms of synagogue life and holidays and Shabbat, and historical Jewish life through a great uncle with a different experience and background. And we heard that there were some formative experiences, most poignant of which would have been Israel and USY, and that led to other kinds of things, these are not surprises to us. These are not surprises to us. But I do want to mention something. Remember what Eric said. He was not the person in Hebrew school that you would have put money on to be involved at this level of Jewish life today. And so there are what we call incidental successes. Things happen that are not predictable, and sometimes we do have some victories that we didn't think we were going to have. And so I think the point that Gordon made, and I think we all understand, rabbis are on the front line. While we have a lot of people who belong to our synagogues, their degree of engagement ranges from barely to intensely. And so we have a very important job to do to try to move those people who are from the barely closer to intensely, knowing that they probably will never get there, and then channel the energies of those people who are there intensely to kind of strengthen our communities, strengthen our organizations, and maybe help us in the outreach process. So. And I think we all understand that this is these are not simple things to do, and I think both Eric and Alicia, who are involved in Jewish organizational life, would agree that it's often sometimes very, very difficult to keep focus on our goals when we've got the day-to-day things we need to deal with. Or as a Jewish professional of my acquaintance many, many years ago had on her wall, it's hard to remember you came to drain the swamp when you're up to your ass in alligators. I know that many of us on a daily basis sometimes feel like we're up to our behinds in alligators. But this kind of a conversation, this kind of a program, I think is strengthening for all of us. It's affirming for those of us who've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years to hear about some young people who are successes. And maybe it's instructive in terms of their journeys to help us in terms of focusing our messages and shaping our programs to maybe tilt the odds a little bit better in favor of the positive Jewish incomes we're looking for. So I want to thank both of you, Eric and Alicia, and secular New Year's coming up. A very happy New Year in the new year, and we look forward to working with you in the capacities in your professional capacities. I mean, Eric, I think you know that all of us are colleagues with you on Long Island in terms of the work that AJC does, whether it's outright anti-Semitism or more subtle kinds of things. And Alicia, I have some ideas I want to talk to you about Zionism. So we'll follow up on all of those things.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything you do. And also for this experience. I think it was really important and was really good for me to reflect a little and think about and some really good questions that I'm still thinking about. So I look forward to talking more.
And I will tell you, I think Rabbi Yafi's intention in recording this is we're going to send this out to our colleagues for their, for them to get the benefit of listening to it, even though they couldn't participate in person.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Ransaq. We appreciate it. Be well.
Success to both of you.
Thank you.
Continued success to both.